Ion by Plato. Translation Benjamin Jowett. Modern English translation ChatGPT. Edited by Sir Adam S. Barnett. Introduction. Ion, a remarkable dialogue by the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, delves deep into the world of art, poetry, and inspiration. In this thought-provoking work, Plato engages in a dialogue with Ion, a skilled rhapsode who specializes in reciting the epic poems of Homer. What unfolds is a captivating exploration of the nature of artistic inspiration and the role of the poet in conveying divine truths to the world. As Plato notes, Ion, what is it that moves you so powerfully, and gives you such pleasure in explaining Homer? I can see it is not for your livelihood, since you hold this fine office of a rhapsode. This question serves as a gateway to the heart of the dialogue, as Plato scrutinizes the nature of Ion's poetic expertise and whether it is truly a result of knowledge or divine inspiration. With the eloquence that is characteristic of his works, Plato takes us on a philosophical journey through the realms of art, craftsmanship, and the divine spark of creativity. He challenges Ion to question whether he truly understands the deep meanings within the epic poems he recites, or if he is merely a conduit for the divine muse's inspiration. Ion is a timeless exploration of the artist's relationship with their craft and the role of inspiration in the creative process. Plato's incisive inquiries, as well as Ion's responses, offer readers an insight into the age-old debate surrounding the origins of artistic genius. This dialogue remains as relevant today as it was in Plato's time, making it a valuable and intellectually stimulating work that continues to inspire and provoke thought. Persons of the dialogue: Socrates, Ion.
Welcome, Ion. Are you from your hometown of Ephesus?
No, Socrates. I am from Epidaurus, where I attended the festival of Asclepius.
And do the Epidaurians have competitions for rhapsodes at the festival?
Oh yes, and all sorts of musical performers too.
And were you one of the competitors and did you succeed?
I won the first prize, Socrates.
Well done, and I hope you will do the same for us at the Panathenaea.
I hope so too, if the gods are willing.
I often envy the profession of a rhapsode, Ion. You always get to wear fine clothes and looking as beautiful as possible is part of your art. And then you get to be constantly in the company of many great poets, especially Homer, who is the best and most divine of them all. Understanding him and not just memorizing his words is something to be greatly admired. And no one can be a rhapsode without understanding the meaning of the poet. After all, the rhapsode should interpret the poet's thoughts to the audience, but how can he do that well if he doesn't know what the poet means? All of this is truly admirable.
Very true, Socrates. Interpreting has indeed been the most challenging aspect of my art. I believe I can speak about Homer better than anyone else. Neither Metrodorus of Lampsacus, nor Stesimbrotus of Thasos, nor Glaucon, nor anyone else who ever lived, had as good ideas about Homer as I do, or as many.
I'm glad to hear you say that, Ion. I can see that you won't refuse to share them with me.
Of course, Socrates. You really should hear how exquisitely I render Homer. I think the Homeridae should give me a golden crown.
I will make sure to hear your embellishments of him another time. But for now, I would like to ask you a quest.
Does your art extend to Hesiod and Archilochus, or only to Homer? Only to Homer, he is more than enough.
Are there any subjects on which Homer and Hesiod agree?
Yes, in my opinion, there are quite a few.
And can you interpret what Homer says better, or what Hesiod says, about these subjects on which they agree?
I can interpret them equally well, Socrates, when they agree.
But what about subjects on which they disagree? For example, about divination, which both Homer and Hesiod have something to say about.
That's true.
Would you or a skilled prophet be a better interpreter of what these two poets say about divination, not just when they agree, but when they disagree?
A prophet.
And if you were a prophet, wouldn't you be able to interpret them when they disagree as well as when they agree?
Clearly.
But how did you come to possess the skill regarding Homer only and not about Hesiod or other poets? Doesn't Homer speak about the same subjects that all other poets address? Isn't war his main theme? And doesn't he talk about human society and interactions between people, good and bad, skilled and unskilled, and about gods conversing with one another and with humans, and about what happens in heaven and in the underworld, and the generations of gods and heroes? Aren't these the themes that Homer sings about?
Very true, Socrates.
And don't the other poets sing about the same themes?
Yes, Socrates, but not in the same way as Homer.
What, in a worse way?
Yes, in a much worse way.
And Homer in a better way?
He is infinitely better.
My dear friend Ion, in a discussion about arithmetic where many people are speaking, there is someone who can judge which speaker is good, right?
Yes,
And the person who judges the good speaker is the same as the person who judges the bad speakers?
yes, they are the same.
And that person would be the arithmetician?
Yes,
Well, in discussions about the wholesomeness of food, when many people are speaking and one speaks better than the rest, would the person who recognizes the better speaker be different from the person who recognizes the worse or the same?
clearly the same.
And who is that person, and what is their name?
The physician.
And in all discussions where the subject is the same and many people are speaking, wouldn't the person who knows the good also know the bad speaker? Because if they don't know the bad, they won't know the good when the same topic is being discussed.
That's true.
So, the same person is skilled in both, right?
Yes,
You say that Homer and other poets, like Hesiod and Archilochus, speak about the same things, but in different ways. One speaks well and the other not so well, correct?
yes, that's right.
And if you knew the good speaker, you would also know that the inferior speakers are inferior?
That's true.
Then, my dear friend, can I be mistaken in saying that Ion is equally skilled in Homer and other poets, since you yourself acknowledge that the same person can judge all those who speak about the same things and that almost all poets do speak about the same things?
So why is it, Socrates, that I lose attention and fall asleep and have no valuable ideas when someone speaks about any other poet, but when Homer is mentioned, I immediately wake up, pay full attention, and have plenty to say?
The reason, my friend, is obvious. It's clear that you speak about Homer without any art or knowledge. If you were able to speak about him using the rules of art, you would have been able to speak about all other poets because poetry is a whole.
Yes,
And when someone acquires any other art as a whole, the same can be said of them. Do you want me to explain what I mean, Ion?
yes, indeed, Socrates. I would love to hear you wise men talk.
Oh, if only we were wise, Ion, and you could truly call us wise. But you rhapsodes and actors and the poets whose verses you sing are wise. I, on the other hand, am a common man who only speaks the truth. Consider this very ordinary and trivial thing I have said. When a person acquires knowledge of a whole art, the inquiry into good and bad is the same. Let's think about this. Isn't the art of painting a whole?
Yes,
And there have been many good and bad painters, right?
yes,
Have you ever known anyone who was skilled in pointing out the strengths and weaknesses of one painter, but incapable of criticizing other painters? Someone who would fall asleep and be at a loss without any ideas when the work of any other painter was produced, but would wake up, pay attention, and have plenty to say only when it came to giving their opinion about that one painter, whether it was Polygnotus or any other.
no, I have never known such a person.
Have you ever known anyone in sculpture who was skilled in explaining the merits of one sculptor, but was at a loss and had nothing to say when the works of sculptors in general were produced?
No, I haven't, just like the previous case.
And if I'm not mistaken, you never met anyone among flute players, harp players, singers to the harp, or rhapsodes who was able to talk about Olympus, the Myras, Orpheus, or Phemius the rhapsode of Ithaca, but was at a loss when it came to speaking about Ion of Ephesus and had no idea about his merits or flaws?
I can't deny what you say, Socrates. Nevertheless, I am aware of myself, and the world agrees with me, that I do speak better and have more to say about Homer than any other person. But I don't speak equally well about others. Can you tell me the reason for this?
I understand, Ion, and I will explain what I believe to be the reason for this. The gift you possess of speaking excellently about Homer is not an art but, as I was just saying, an inspiration. There is a divinity moving you like the one contained in the stone that Euripides calls a magnet but which is commonly known as the stone of Heraclea. This stone not only attracts iron rings but also imparts to them a similar power of attracting other rings. Sometimes you can see a number of pieces of iron and rings suspended from one another, forming a long chain. All of them derive their power of suspension from the original stone. In the same way, the muse first inspires men themselves, and from these inspired individuals, a chain of other people is suspended who also become inspired. For all good poets, whether they write epics or lyrics, compose their beautiful poems not through skill, but because they are inspired and possessed. Just as the Carabanchan revelers are not in their right mind when they dance, the lyric poets are also not in their right mind when they compose their beautiful verses. It is when they are under the influence of music and meter that they are inspired and possessed. They are like Bakshik maidens who draw milk and honey from rivers when they are under the influence of Dionysus, but not when they are in their right mind. The soul of the lyric poet does the same, as they themselves say. They claim to bring songs from honeyed fountains, gathering them from the gardens and valleys of the muses. They are like bees, moving from flower to flower. And this is true. For the poet is a light and winged and holy thing, and he cannot create until he has been inspired and is out of his senses. When he has not reached this state, he is powerless and unable to speak his oracles. Poets speak many noble words about the actions of men, but, like yourself when speaking about Homer, they do not speak by any rules of art. They are simply inspired to utter what the muse compels them to say. When inspired, one poet may create dithyrambs, another may write hymns of praise, another may compose choral strains, and another may write epic or iambic verses. Each poet excels in one form and is not skilled in any other. This is because the poet does not sing through technique, but through divine power. If the poet had learned through rules of art, he would be able to speak about all themes, not just one. Therefore, God takes away the minds of poets and uses them as his ministers, just as he uses diviners and holy prophets. Through them, he converses with us. When we hear the poets, we should understand that they are not speaking of themselves, but that God himself is speaking through them. Tynnichus the Chalcidian is a perfect example of this. He wrote nothing worth remembering except for the famous paean, which everyone knows. It is one of the finest poems ever written, and he himself admits that it is simply an invention of the muses. In this way, God shows us that these beautiful poems are not human, but divine. The poets are only the interpreters of the gods who possess them. Is this not the lesson that God intended to teach when he made the worst of poets sing the best of songs? Am I not right, Ion?
Yes, indeed, Socrates. I feel that you are right. Your words touch my soul, and I am convinced that good poets interpret the things of the gods to us through divine inspiration.
And you rhapsodists are the interpreters of the poets?
That is correct.
So, you are the interpreters of interpreters?
Exactly.
I want you to tell me honestly, Ion, what I am about to ask you. When you have the greatest impact on the audience while reciting a powerful passage, such as the scene where Odysseus appears before the suitors and shoots his arrows at his feet, or the description of Achilles charging at Hector, or the sorrows of Andromache. Hecuba, or Priam, are you in your right mind? Are you not carried away, and does your soul seem to be among the people or places you are speaking of, whether they are in Ithaca or Troy or any other setting of the poem?
Your argument strikes a chord with me, Socrates. I must confess that when I tell a tale of pity, tears well up in my eyes, and when I speak of horrors, my hair stands on end and my heart beats faster.
Well, Ion, what do you think of a man who, at a sacrifice or festival, is dressed in festive attire, wearing golden crowns on his head that no one has taken from him? And yet he appears weeping or in a state of panic in front of more than 20,000 friendly faces, with no one harming or mistreating him. Would you say that he is in his right mind?
No, Socrates, strictly speaking, I would say that he is not in his right mind.
And are you aware that you have a similar effect on most of the spectators?
Unfortunately, I am aware of it. From the stage, I see their various emotions of pity, wonder, and sternness reflected on their faces while I am speaking. I have to pay close attention to them because if I make them cry, I will laugh, and if I make them laugh, I will cry when it's time for me to receive payment.
Do you know that the audience is the final link in the chain through which the power of the original magnet passes from one person to another? The rhapsode, like yourself, and the actor are intermediate links, and the poet himself is the first link. Through all of these, God influences the souls of men in any way he pleases, making one person hang on the words of another. There is a vast chain of dancers, masters, and undermasters of choruses who are suspended as if from a stone at the side of the rings which hang down from the muse. And every poet has a muse who inspires and possesses them. The poets are like the first rings, with some being inspired by Orpheus and Musaeus, but most being possessed by Homer. Ion, you are one of those possessed by Homer. When someone recites the words of another poet, you fall asleep and don't know what to say. But when someone recites a strain of Homer, you wake up and your soul leaps within you and you have plenty to say. It's not because of your knowledge or skill in Homer that you speak, but because of divine inspiration and possession, just like the Carabanchan revelers who are only able to perceive the strain that is associated with the god who possesses them. When the name of Homer is mentioned, you have plenty to say, but you have nothing to say about other poets. You ask why this is, and the answer is that you praise Homer not by skill but by divine inspiration.
That's good, Socrates. But I doubt that you will ever be able to convince me that I only praise Homer when I am mad and possessed. If you could hear me speak about him, I'm sure you would not think that's the case.
I would like to hear you, but first, you must answer a question. In which parts of Homer do you speak well? Surely not about every part.
There is no part, Socrates, about which I do not speak well. I can assure you of that.
Are you knowledgeable about all the things in Homer?
What is there in Homer of which I have no knowledge?
Well, doesn't Homer talk about various arts in many passages? For example, about driving? If I can remember the lines, I will recite them.
I remember them and will recite them.
Tell me then what Nestor says to his son Antilochus about being careful with the turn in the horse race in honor of Patroclus.
He says, "Bend gently in the polished chariot to the left of them, and urge the horse on the right hand with whip and voice, and slacken the rein. And when you are at the goal, let the left horse draw near, yet so that the nave of the well-wrought wheel may not even seem to touch the extremity, and avoid catching the stone."
That's enough. Now, Ion, who would be a better judge of the correctness of these lines, a charioteer or a physician?
Clearly, the charioteer.
And why is that? Is it because it is their art, or is there another reason?
No, that's the reason.
Every art is appointed by God to have knowledge of a specific work. We don't know what the pilot knows through the art of medicine, do we?
Certainly not.
And we don't know what the carpenter knows through the art of medicine, do we?
Certainly not.
This is true for all arts. We don't know what we know through one art through another art. But let me ask a prior quest.
Do you agree that there are different arts? Yes.
And you would argue, as I would, that when one art is of one kind of knowledge and another art is of another kind, they are different?
Yes.
Yes, surely. If the subject of knowledge were the same, it would be meaningless to say that the arts were different because they would both provide the same knowledge. For example, I know that there are 5 fingers here, and you know the same. If I were to ask whether we both learned this through the same art of arithmetic, you would acknowledge that we did.
Yes.
So, tell me what I was intending to ask you. Does this hold universally? Must the same art have the same subject of knowledge, and different arts have different subjects of knowledge?
That's my opinion, Socrates.
Then someone who has no knowledge of a particular art will not have a proper judgment of the sayings and actions related to that art?
That's very true.
So, who would be a better judge of the lines you were reciting from Homer, you or the charioteer?
The charioteer.
Yes, because you were a rhapsode, not a charioteer.
Yes.
And the art of the rhapsode is different from the art of the charioteer?
Yes.
And if they are different arts, then they have knowledge of different matters?
True.
Do you know the passage where Hecamede, Nestor's concubine, is described as giving a posset made with Pramnian wine to the wounded Machaon? She also grated cheese of goat's milk with a bronze grater and placed an onion next to him to enhance the taste of the drink. Now, would you say that the art of the rhapsode or the art of medicine is better able to judge the correctness of these lines?
The art of medicine, clearly.
And when Homer says, "And she descended into the deep like a leaden plummet which set in the horn of an ox that roams in the fields rushes along carrying death among the ravenous fishes," would the art of the fisherman or the art of the rhapsode be better able to judge if these lines are expressed correctly?
Clearly, Socrates, the art of the fisherman.
Now, imagine if you were to say to me, since you, Socrates, can assign different passages in Homer to their corresponding arts, I want you to tell me which passages should be judged for excellence by the prophet and prophetic art. You will see how readily and accurately I will answer you. There are many such passages, especially in the Odyssey. For example, the passage where Theoclymenus, the prophet of the house of Melampus, says to the suitors, "Wretched men, what is happening to you? Your heads, faces, and limbs are covered in darkness, and the sound of lamentation fills the air. Your cheeks are wet with tears. The vestibule and the courtyard are filled with ghosts descending into the darkness of the underworld. The sun has vanished from the sky, and an evil mist spreads all around Odyssey." There are also many such passages in the Iliad. For instance, in the description of the battle near the rampart where it says, "As they were eager to cross the ditch, an omen appeared to them. A soaring eagle, holding back the people on the left, carried a huge bloody dragon in its talons, still alive and panting. The dragon did not give up the fight, it bent back and struck the bird carrying it on the breast by the neck. In pain, the bird dropped the dragon to the ground in the midst of the crowd. And with a cry the eagle was carried away on the wings of the wind. Iliad. These are the kinds of passages that I believe the prophet should consider and judge.
You are absolutely right, Socrates, in saying so.
Yes, Ion, and you are also right. Since I have chosen passages from the Iliad and Odyssey that describe the roles of the prophet, physician, and fisherman, it is now your turn, Ion, who knows Homer much better than I do, to select passages that relate to the rhapsode and the art of rhapsody. These are the passages that the rhapsode should examine and judge better than anyone else.
I believe that all passages should be included, Socrates.
Not all, Ion. Haven't you already forgotten what you said? A rhapsode should have a better memory.
Why, what am I forgetting?
Don't you remember that you said the art of the rhapsode is different from the art of the charioteer?
Yes, I remember.
And you admitted that because they are different, they would have different areas of knowledge?
Yes.
So, according to your own words, the rhapsode and the art of rhapsody will not know everything?
I would exclude certain things, Socrates.
You mean to say that you would exclude most subjects of the other arts? Since the rhapsode doesn't know all of them, which ones will he know?
He will know what a man and a woman should say, what a freeman and a slave should say, and what a ruler and a subject should say.
Are you saying that a rhapsode will know better than a pilot what the ruler of a ship in a storm should say?
No, the pilot will know best.
Will the rhapsode know better than a physician what the ruler of a sick person should say?
No, he will not.
But he will know what a slave should say?
Yes.
Let's say the slave is a cowherd. Will the rhapsode know better than the cowherd what he should say to calm down enraged cows?
No, he will not.
But he will know what a spinner should say about the process of spinning wool?
No.
At least he will know what a general should say when motivating his soldiers?
Yes, that's the kind of thing the rhapsode will definitely know.
Well, is the art of the rhapsode the same as the art of the general?
To me, there doesn't seem to be any difference between them.
What do you mean? Are you saying that the art of the rhapsode and the art of the general are the same?
Yes, they are one and the same.
So, a good rhapsode is also a good general?
Certainly, Socrates.
And a good general is also a good rhapsode?
No, I don't say that.
But you do say that a good rhapsode is also a good general.
Certainly.
And you, Ion, are the best rhapsode in all of Greece?
Undoubtedly, Socrates. And Homer was my teacher.
But then, Ion, why on earth do you, who are the best general and the best rhapsode in all of Greece, go around as a rhapsode when you could be a general? Do you think the Greeks need a rhapsode with a golden crown but not a general?
Well, Socrates, the reason is that my fellow Ephesians are the servants and soldiers of Athens, and they don't need a general. As for you in Sparta, you probably have enough generals of your own.
My dear Ion, have you never heard of Apollodorus of Cyzicus?
Who is he?
He is a foreigner who has often been chosen as a general by the Athenians. They have also appointed Phanasthenes of Andrus and Heraclides of Clazomenae, both foreigners, to lead their armies and hold other offices after proving their worth. So, if you prove yourself worthy, won't the Athenians choose you, Ion the Ephesian, as their general and honor you? After all, the Ephesians were originally Athenians, and Ephesus is a respectable city. But, Ion, if you claim to possess the art and knowledge to praise Homer, you are not being fair with me. Despite your claims of knowing many glorious things about Homer and promising to show them to me, you are merely deceiving me. Even after my repeated requests, you refuse to explain the nature of this art you claim to master. You are as elusive as Proteus, taking on different forms and evading my questions. Now you even pretend to be a general just to avoid showing me your knowledge of Homer. If you truly possess this art, then you are not being honest by breaking your promise to exhibit Homer. But if, as I suspect, you have no art and speak about Homer with such eloquence unconsciously under his inspiring influence, then I absolve you of dishonesty and can only say that you are inspired. Which would you prefer to be seen as, dishonest or inspired?
There is a significant difference, Socrates, between the two options, and inspiration is certainly the nobler one.
In that case, Ion, I will choose the nobler option and attribute your praises of Homer to inspiration rather than art.
Epilogue. Benjamin Jowett's original introduction has been moved to this epilogue. The Ion is the shortest, or nearly the shortest, of all the writings which bear the name of Plato, and is not authenticated by any early external testimony. The grace and beauty of this little work supply the only, and perhaps a sufficient, proof of its genuineness. The plan is Simple, the dramatic interest consists entirely in the contrast between the irony of Socrates and the transparent vanity and childlike enthusiasm of the rhapsode Ion. The theme of the dialogue may possibly have been suggested by the passage of Xenophon's Memorabilia, in which the rhapsodists are described by Euthydemus as very precise about the exact words of Homer, but very idiotic themselves. Compare Aristotle. Met. Ion the rhapsode has just come to Athens. He has been exhibiting in Epidaurus at the festival of Asclepius, and is intending to exhibit at the festival of the Panathenaea. Socrates admires and envies the rhapsode's art, for he is always well dressed and in good company, in the company of good poets and of Homer, who is the prince of them. In the course of conversation the admission is elicited from Ion that his skill is restricted to Homer, and that he knows nothing of inferior poets, such as Hesiod and Archilochus. He brightens up and is wide awake when Homer is being recited, but is apt to go to sleep at the recitations of any other poet. And yet, surely, he who knows the superior ought to know the inferior also. He who can judge of the good speaker is able to judge of the bad. And poetry is a whole, and he who judges of poetry by rules of art ought to be able to judge of all poetry. This is confirmed by the analogy of sculpture, painting, flute playing, and the other arts. The argument is at last brought home to the mind of Ion, who asks how this contradiction is to be solved. The solution given by Socrates is as follows. The rhapsode is not guided by rules of art, but is an inspired person who derives a mysterious power from the poet, and the poet, in like manner, is inspired by the god. The poets and their interpreters may be compared to a chain of magnetic rings suspended from one another, and from a magnet. The magnet is the muse, and the ring which immediately follows is the poet himself. From him are suspended other poets. There is also a chain of rhapsodes and actors, who also hang from the muses, but are let down at the side, and the last ring of all is the spectator. The poet is the inspired interpreter of the god, and this is the reason why some poets, like Homer, are restricted to a single theme, or, like Tynnichus, are famous for a single poem, and the rhapsode is the inspired interpreter of the poet, and for a similar reason some rhapsodes, like Ion, are the interpreters of single poets. Ion is delighted at the notion of being inspired, and acknowledges that he is beside himself when he is performing. His eyes rain tears and his hair stands on end. Socrates is of opinion that a man must be mad who behaves in this way at a festival when he is surrounded by his friends, and there is nothing to trouble him. Ion is confident that Socrates would never think him mad if he could only hear his embellishments of Homer. Socrates asks whether he can speak well about everything in Homer. Yes, indeed he can. What about things of which he has no knowledge? Ion answers that he can interpret anything in Homer. But, rejoins Socrates, when Homer speaks of the arts, as for example, of chariot driving, or of medicine, or of prophecy, or of navigation, will he, or will the charioteer or physician or prophet or pilot be the better judge? Ion is compelled to admit that every man will judge of his own particular art better than the rhapsode. He still maintains, however, that he understands the art of the general as well as anyone. Then why in this city of Athens, in which men of merit are always being sought after, is he not at once appointed a general? Ion replies that he is a foreigner, and the Athenians and Spartans will not appoint a foreigner to be their general. No, that is not the real reason. There are many examples to the contrary. But Ion has long been playing tricks with the argument. Like Proteus, he transforms himself into a variety of shapes, and is at last about to run away in the disguise of a general. Would he rather be regarded as inspired or dishonest? Ion, who has no suspicion of the irony of Socrates, eagerly embraces the alternative of inspiration. The Ion, like the other earlier Platonic dialogues, is a mixture of jest and earnest, in which no definite result is obtained, but some Socratic or Platonic truths are allowed dimly to appear. The elements of a true theory of poetry are contained in the notion that the poet is inspired. Genius is often said to be unconscious, or spontaneous, or a gift of nature. That genius is akin to madness is a popular aphorism of modern times. The greatest strength is observed to have an element of limitation. Sense or passion are too much for the dry light of intelligence which mingles with them and becomes discolored by them. Imagination is often at war with reason and fact. The concentration of the mind on a single object, or on a single aspect of human nature, overpowers the orderly perception of the whole. Yet the feelings too bring truths home to the minds of many who in the way of reason would be incapable of understanding them. Reflections of this kind may have been passing before Plato's mind when he describes the poet as inspired, or when, as in the Apology, he speaks of poets as the worst critics of their own writings. Anybody taken at random from the crowd is a better interpreter of them than they are of themselves. They are sacred persons, winged and holy things who have a touch of madness in their composition, Phaedr, and should be treated with every sort of respect, Republic, but not allowed to live in a well-ordered state. Like the statesmen in the Meno, they have a divine instinct, but they are narrow and confused. They do not attain to the clearness of ideas, or to the knowledge of poetry, or of any other art as a whole. In the Protagoras, the ancient poets are recognized by Protagoras himself as the original sophists, and this family resemblance may be traced in the Ion. The rhapsode belongs to the realm of imitation and of opin.
He professes to have all knowledge, which is derived by him from Homer. Just as the sophist professes to have all wisdom, which is contained in his art of rhetoric. Even more than the sophist, he is incapable of appreciating the commonest logical distinctions. He cannot explain the nature of his own art. His great memory contrasts with his inability to follow the steps of the argument. And in his highest moments of inspiration, he has an eye to his own gains.
The old quarrel between philosophy and poetry, which in the Republic leads to their final separation, is already working in the mind of Plato, and is embodied by him in the contrast between Socrates and Ion. Yet here, as in the Republic, Socrates shows a sympathy with the poetic nature. Also, the manner in which Ion is affected by his own recitations affords a lively illustration of the power which, in the Republic, Socrates attributes to dramatic performances over the mind of the performer. His allusion to his embellishments of Homer, in which he declares himself to have surpassed Metrodorus of Lampsacus and Stesimbrotus of Thassos, seems to show that, like them, he belonged to the allegorical school of interpreters. The circumstance that nothing more is known of him may be adduced in confirmation of the argument that this truly Platonic little work is not a forgery of later times.